You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
I've never been one to get involved in manias and trends and fads. I went through so many of those as a kid and never really cared. Never cared that everybody wanted to wear this certain type of thing. It never appealed to me. And even in pop culture, it's like, well, that's the newest big thing. And either I was already into it, like Star Wars or other, big movie properties. It's rare that I'll just, hey, everybody's watching this, so we should all watch this. And yet, I found myself watching last week Squid Game on Netflix. The Squid Game. I have to admit, I was intrigued by the premise not because it's new and fresh. We've seen this premise over and over again. And it's interesting to me that it's always, anytime it comes up, it's always like, oh my God, have you heard about this new thing? It's like a game show, and people go on and they either win or they die. You're like, yeah, it's Running Man, Hunger Games, Battle Royale, Most Dangerous Game. These are things we've had for a long time. I mean, isn't even to some degree Clue? I mean, you can't begin the game of Clue till some poor guy gets iced. And yet, people go on and on about it as if it's some new premise, and it always goes to socioeconomic overtones of, well, these people have to because the system won't let them get ahead. The system is fighting against them. The system. I guess. And there's always flaws in that. I remember reading Running Man. Running Man was written by Stephen King, writing under the pseudonym of Richard Bachman. That was his other writing name. I was old enough or young enough that the cat was already out of the bag. We knew that Stephen King was Richard Bachman when they published the Bachman books. And I had the Bachman books, and I read them cover to cover. And it contains The Running Man, and also contains The Long Walk, which I'll get to in a second. But The Running Man is about a guy who's named Ben Richards. It takes place in the future. And Ben just can't get a break. He can't find a job. He's aggressively and actively looking for a job. And he can't find a job. And The Running Man just becomes his last resort. And The Running Man is this televised show where a host named Killian sends people off into the United States, The Running Man, and then sends these hunter-seekers out to find them. And the game is played across the entire nation, with the Running Man they have 30 days to elude capture, and they'll win a big prize. And in the context of the book, I don't think anyone's ever won. I think that everybody tries the Running Man because they're chasing that first victory. Remember when Who Wants to Be a Millionaire came on the air, and people watched it incessantly because no one reached the top? Who's going to be the first person to reach $1 million? And then that guy did, and the show kind of fell off because someone had scaled the peak, and the mountain didn't seem that tall anymore. So The Running Man, the allure of it is no one's won, so let's give it a shot. And Ben signs on, and I remember there's a whole lot of physical tests that he goes through, and mental tests, and then he sets off. And the book itself, once you take off the veneer of the flashy game portion, is about socioeconomic problems, because Ben had no other place to go. He was out of options. He was starving. He needed the money. The Running Man was going to provide him with food and money and the promise that if he made it, he would become rich and famous the rest of his life and not have to work so hard. Now, the other thing to Running Man in the book is that there's an entire underground of people who want to help the Running Man. They want to, it's like an underground railroad for game show contestants. And he hooks up with these people who are going to help him get places. And the other part is that the whole country's watching. So being able to point to people, point to the Running Man, I saw him, he ran right by me. It becomes this point of celebrity. And you can imagine if they made it now, it would be a cell phone culture of people constantly on their phones filming any speck of the Running Man going by them so that they could get on the show and get those all-important clicks, right? Isn't life now all about clicks and likes and people like what I'm posting? And do I get that dopamine hit of, oh my God, they liked my post? And you could see a game show focused around that. Absolutely. I know that Matt Damon was working on a game show that was like a real life Running Man where they were going to hire people or, recruit people to either run or be a hunter. And I don't think it ever got off the ground. I think it had a lot to do with 9/11 derailed a lot of reality show plans like that. But The Running Man was eventually made into a movie, obviously, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And they changed everything about it. And Ben Richards, instead of being a guy down on his luck, became a helicopter pilot, police officer, who was ordered to fire his weapons on people in Bakersfield having a riot over food. And when he refuses, they knock him out and doctor the footage so that it looks like he did it. It's early face replacement to make it look like he fires on the people and becomes what the media dubs him, the Butcher of Bakersfield. And so he ends up on the show as an escaped convict with nowhere else to go. But Ben Richards started out as a decent man. And The Running Man is a corrupt game show meant to take advantage of people. It is not your last hope. In the book, it's your last hope. No one's forcing you to become the Running Man in the book. And in the movie, it's different. He's cast by Killian now, played by Richard Dawson, because Ben's a charismatic, buff man who can give the audience what they want. There's a lot of social satire in the film of Running Man. They do away with the entire country as the game show board, and instead it's in like a few burned out streets of Los Angeles. Like after a riot, they just walled it off, Escape from New York style. And I get why they did that. They did that because you've only got so much money in a movie like that. Running Man was not a big budget movie, directed by Paul Michael Glaser from Starsky and Hutch, but not a big budget movie. Not like Total Recall a few years later, where Paul Verhoeven was given a blank check to imagine whatever future he wanted. No, Running Man is a much smaller budgeted movie, so I know why they did the self-contained game zone. Like, you get why they make those accommodations. There's a lot of audience interaction, and a lot of the people are watching. The TV is on. It's the same device they would use for Hunger Games, where they would make sure you, the audience, were well aware that the Hunger Games are being televised and that people are watching this. In the same book, the Bachman books, there's a story called The Long Walk, where a guy named Ray Garrity, again, it's a society where young men cannot find jobs. They don't know what to do with their lives. And so they enter these suicidal games based partly on the need for food and shelter, money, and partly for the need for attention. They need someone to look at them because they're being ignored by society. So they sign on to The Long Walk, which is a game show where 100 men set out jogging at a brisk pace. And if you fall behind, you are shot. If you fall and can't get up, you are shot. There is a half-track riding alongside the whole time with a gun on you. So it's last man standing wins. And as it goes on for days and days, and these guys eat and urinate on the road and never slow down, and Ray Garrity is this underdog who keeps telling himself, pick him up and put him down regarding his feet. Pick him up and put him down. We're introduced to the characters, and we get to know them. And there's one guy that's nigh unstoppable until he gets a cold. And then when he drops, he basically tells them, all of you are going to go farther than me because I got a cold, because I wasn't going to stop. And then they shoot him. And in the end, Ray Garrity, our main character, is facing off against, I think his name is Steuben. It's been a long time since I've read it, and I don't have notes on it. He's the son of the guy who created the Long Walk. So we have Ray Garrity, who did the Long Walk out of need, out of food need, and wanting to be somebody. And then the other guy simply wanting to thumb his nose and his middle finger at his father in front of the whole world. And when he gets cut down, leaving Ray Garrity the winner, it's a really solemn affair. You don't feel any elation that Ray has won. And neither should you. Because for Ray to win, 99 other people have to die. And life isn't cheap. Life is important. Life is all we have in the end. Right? Isn't that right? So when Ray Garrity wins, and the people following the Long Walk, the runners are given these belts with like food paste and water supplements. And when they drop them for a new one, people run up and grab them as souvenirs. So again, you're conscious that people are watching, even though the Long Walk, they're running through the middle of America where there's nobody most of the time. But they calculate when the race is going to end. So that when it comes down to like 5 guys, they're running through huge stands of people, cheering them on and placing bets, so that when the final guy is cut down, leaving Ray as our last man walking, it's in a huge crowd of people. And Ray is crowned the winner and given all the treasures he's earned by outlasting the 99 other guys. And what does he do? He goes insane. And he keeps running. He doesn't know when to stop. And that's how the book ends. And you're not given any moment of, wow, he did it. Or, oh my God, he did it. You're given a moment of, what did he do? And shouldn't that be the message of all of these stories? People that put their lives on the line for a game, to gain money, fame, whatever. It should be the ultimate sacrifice, because that's what it is. You're giving up your very life. The Hunger Games is a different animal. Susan Collins' book, when it came out, was revolutionary in that Katniss Everdeen is a reluctant hero. She is not bloodthirsty in any way. She volunteers for the Hunger Games to save her sister's life. And during the course of the Hunger Games, spends every minute figuring out how not to kill anyone. And everybody dies around her for reasons that she had nothing to do with. Katniss emerges from the Hunger Games as the victor, with her and Peeta threatening to eat the berries and kill themselves, only to be crowned double winners. Katniss is one of the few that emerges from one of these kinds of things unscathed in her character, because she never sacrifices her ideals. She never knowingly, willingly commits cold-blooded murder, unlike the other characters around her who are just eager to start the killing, eager for bloodshed. And that's the difference with those. And here's the thing. I don't think they're very good books. But Collins does a great job of making sure that her character doesn't kill anybody unless it's kill or be killed, or it's an accident, or yada, yada, yada. You get it. Now, there's other books in that series, Catching Fire and Mockingjay, where everything changes, and it's about fashion, and it's about a rebellion against the capital, and ultimately, Katniss's sister is killed anyways by her own people, by the rebels. It's a real bittersweet ending to the Hunger Games in that the whole thing is set off by Katniss wanting to save her sister's life, and in the end, she ends up saving civilization and society, but loses her sister. And don't they, at the end, start their own capital Hunger Games, and like, Katniss doesn't really learn that lesson yet? It's interesting. And the other thing is, when you get to the capital in the final books, it's not anything you expected it to be. I don't think she had a plan for what the capital was going to be, because the capital is like a rotten birthday cake. It looks great on the outside, but every time they go inside somewhere, it's all decayed and gross and not at all the opulence that they all pictured, that we, the reader, pictured in our minds. But again, Hunger Games does the trope of letting you know at every turn that people are watching. You know, they show the footage of people watching the Hunger Games and, you know, betting and engaging, and you're aware that it is a gladiator games of people pitted against each other, but with an audience, like the Roman Colosseum. And that's where we finally get, I know, Jeff, get to it. We finally get to Squid Game, and it doesn't have that. At least we don't think it has that. Squid Game, and you'll forgive me, the names are pretty difficult, and I would never be able to keep track of them. So I'll just say our main character. I can't say hero, because he's not a hero in any way. We're introduced to our main character in episode 1, and he's a loser. He's a complete loser. He has no money. He steals and hides money from his mother, who works really hard. He gambles money at the track. He is a degenerate gambler. Even when he has money for a gift, he gambles on a claw machine to get the gift and loses again most of his money. The series sets up pretty well that our main character is an a-hole. He's not anybody you really like. He's not anybody you root for. He is a horrible, horrible person. And even when he gets a bit of good luck, he's still beset upon loan sharks. Like, this guy has done so much awful in his life that he's hard to like. He's a hard guy to like. I found myself in the first episode finding difficulty relating to anyone, because they're all just horrible people. He ends up meeting a guy at the train station where he offers a really childish game of, it looks like some version of Pog, where you have to knock a piece of paper over that you fold up. You know, something that kids would play where they didn't have any money. The game pieces are something that you could get from your school supplies. And he ends up getting smacked around a lot, betting a slap on his face against 10,000 won. Now, you spend most of this show, and I'm like everybody else. You spend most of this show trying to figure out how much money it actually is. I never Googled it because I realized at the end I really don't care. It's enough money that he cares, so that's enough for me, story-wise. The slapping guy gives him a card to play some other game. And the guy doesn't the guy that does the slapping, the card guy, he's very charismatic. They hired a really good-looking guy to do it. It seems like a no-brainer to bet a slap against legitimate money, right? In a game that doesn't look like it has that much skill. So our character is down on his luck some more and ends up calling the number, and that leads him to the outskirts of town where a van picks him up and everybody in the van's asleep. You find out that the driver is wearing a gas mask and everybody is gassed, so they don't know where they're going. He wakes up in a compound that looks like a prison where there are dormitory beds everywhere, and that he is number 456. The last guy to call the number to get to play whatever this is. We assume it's the Squid Game because that's the name of the title, but that's not entirely true. It's just the game. The writer does a really clever trick of giving all of our characters memorable numbers so that we can keep track of who's who. Our guy is 456, so it's 456. He meets number 1, and so on and so on. You get the idea. But we meet a small cast of characters. He meets a very old guy who's number 1. He meets a young girl who is a pickpocket who he ran into earlier that he can't stand because she took his money when he needed it the most. We meet an underworld criminal guy who's really overbearing. We meet a crazy woman who pits everybody against each other. And then we also meet our main character's cousin, who is the most successful person in his family. Except, surprise, surprise, everybody in the big dormitory room has incredible amounts of debt. I don't know how the economic system in Korea works. There's never a primer or an explanation given on what goes on. I don't know why all these people are in such crippling debt. It's never explained other than the young girl is trying to get her family from North Korea. That's very noble, except that she's also a criminal and not above criminal activity. The criminal guy, we get, he's a criminal. The crazy guy, she's crazy. The old guy, they're all just in debt. And they're all in this room to play a game that, if they win, will get them out of debt. We're introduced to the soldiers of the show. They are dressed like Jawas in not Jawas, but they're like Among Us, if you know that game my kids play. And they all have symbols on their faces. They're basically PlayStation symbols, except for the X. The triangle, the square, and the circle are all represented, and they represent different hierarchies of authority in this, whatever this world is that the people have volunteered for. They're taken to the first game. It is Red Light, Green Light, the name of the episode. And a giant robot way across the field looks at them and says, red light, green light. And when she turns her head around, you have to run towards the safe zone. She will swivel her head around, and if you're moving, because it's red light, if you're moving, you get shot and killed. And we start to see like brutal, gory bloodshed in this world. And everybody is taken aback because suddenly the stakes are very high. People are dying around them. And it's not a joke because we see heads blown open, people riddled with bullets. The gunfire is brisk and bloody, and people are cut down. And they get the gist of red light, green light because the old guy runs out first. And they're all racing for the safe zone. And it goes on quite a long time. It's a timed game, but of course, you know, in the movies, timers aren't absolute. They're just a way to ratchet tension up by putting a ticking clock on it. Our hero advances and advances by hiding behind people so that his movements are covered. At one point, he's about to fall, and he is held aloft by a Middle Eastern guy from Pakistan or Sri Lanka. I don't remember exactly. Really good character, though. Just a guy who needs money and is trying to survive. I think about half of them make it across the line. And the production design for this show is pretty good. They do a really good job. The dormitory room looks huge and cavernous. The hallways of staircases, the MC Escher staircases, look enough like a Super Mario Brothers level that it's whimsical. And the set piece of Red Light, Green Light is very well done. The robot looks great. I found out later it was not made for the show. It belongs in a small village where it's on display. Like, imagine that village now. Do they point and laugh like, hey, there's that thing from that movie? Or do they go, we're going to get shot if we move? I don't know. But the production design and the look of the Red Light, Green Light set piece is really amazing. It's as good as any big budget Hollywood movie. And I found myself wondering exactly how much of it is real versus CGI. And when I looked at some making of it, it's all pretty real. They built most of this stuff. The stuff that they can't build, obviously, is the dangerous stuff, but we'll get to that in some later episodes of the Squid Game. For the most part, the show is well budgeted, and it's all up on the screen. We're also introduced to a sort of game master who is the main guy running the show at wherever we are, because we don't know where we're at yet. But he looks like Kylo Ren. It looks like they just cribbed Kylo Ren from the Star Wars sequels, the prequel sequels. Yes, and like it's not even subtle. He even talks like Kylo Ren. It's interesting. It's an interesting choice. He's a great villain, if that's what he is. We're never really told what's going on yet. But he does give off Kylo Ren vibes. The way he walks, his mannerisms. So the game players are taken back to the dormitory where they're all enraged because they now realize it's life and death, and that if they don't win, you die. You either win or you die. Now, they do lower a piggy bank down from the ceiling. It's the one part of the show that I think is kind of silly, that it's a literal piggy bank. That must be... as you figure out at the end of the show why things look the way they do, I guess the piggy bank makes some sort of sense, but it comes across as almost too whimsical as the end goal of winning this game. It really does. But the money drops in. It's physical. It's not like a tote board. If they made it in America, it would just be a tote board. Because I remember season 1 of Survivor back in, 2000? I remember that CBS demanded that when they went to tribal council, there had to be a treasure chest of money sitting next to Jeff Probst so that the players knew exactly what they were playing for. So there is precedent for this kind of nonsensory in a show like this. Yeah, no, that's true. You can look it up. The first season of Survivor, there was a treasure chest of money on display to see what you were going to win. They eliminated that by season 2 because even Jeff Probst said, this just makes us look stupid. And he was right. I understand why it's there in Squid Game, but I don't dig the piggy bank vibe of it. But even the money itself, because they only played the first game, so it only fills the bottom third or fourth of the piggy bank. They're all told that if more than half of them want to give up, then the game ends and everybody goes home. So they take a vote, and because this is a Netflix show, because it's a TV show, because it's 9 episodes, all of this is played out to the nth degree, where instead of just getting to it, there's a lot of melodrama. And I think that's where, for me, the show loses me. Because it's not that I have a short attention span. It's that I can tell that a lot of this is just filler because they don't know how to pad 9 episodes with this premise. There's a lot of filler in this, but that's typical. I mean, all those Marvel shows on Disney Plus, filler, man. But shows like Black Mirror, this has been compared to, they've said it's like a 9-episode arc of a Black Mirror episode. Black Mirror gets to it because they've only got 1 episode. You got to get to it. The vote has to be gotten to so that we can just drop down to the votes that matter. And ultimately, I think it's the old guy, number 1, who votes to leave. So everybody is sent back home. They're dropped off, bound and blindfolded in the middle of nowhere, and they have to walk back to civilization. Interesting first episode. It surprised me that they all decided to go home. Because, if they decide to go home, then they're not going to play the game. The Squid Game won't be played unless they play the Squid Game. And if they all go home, there's no way to play it. And we're dropped back into the small villages of Korea. These small streets of stalls and small businesses and people starving and yada, yada, yada. And even though that's the safety of life, we're away from these crazy people with guns, as the viewer, you're like, when are they going to get back to the game? Because I thought we were going to play these games of life and death. But it does give the characters, now they have the option. Now, if you go back, if you decide to call the number again, you know what you're going in for. There's no surprise here. You know that you are signing up to put your life as a wager. And so the second episode is quite boring. We get more backstory on the characters, and I have to admit, I was bored to tears. I know that this is important story building, and it's not all about action set pieces. I totally get that. But like the beginning of Pulp Fiction, when Vincent and Jules are going to bust in on those guys, but they pull back, the camera waits at the door because that's where the action is supposed to be, and why aren't we getting to it? So I get a little bit of that. I do get it. But I don't know if it should have been an entire hour. The difference is that we're introduced to another character because, of course, our main character goes to the police who don't believe him, and somebody overhears him, another police officer, who we are introduced to. His brother vanished years ago, and he suspected something similar because of a strange business card in his brother's stuff. So the cop follows our main character, and when our main character is gassed again, so that he doesn't know where they're going, the cop decides to tag along. So the cop finds that the vans are taken to a ferry and taken across the ocean to an island, and an island is where these games take place far from the authorities so that no one can escape and run to the police. You either emerge a victor or you're put in a black box wrapped with pink ribbon and incinerated. So now we have our two storylines. We have our main character playing the games and trying to survive to attain a better life. And we have this cop who will be our surrogate, our proxy, moving through the buildings, showing us what exactly is going on. Because the players aren't privy to it, and unless the players go there, we're not going to go there. So then we get to episode 3. It's called The Man with the Umbrella. And they play a game that is baffling because it's from Korean culture. And American audiences, we have no concept of it. They're herded to an arena where there is a giant playground. There are 4 shapes: the circle, the square, the triangle, and an umbrella. And they're told to pick a door, one of those symbols. And they're given a honeycomb candy with that shape stamped into it. It makes sense a little bit because we did see the cop watching the soldiers in their maskless forms making the candy the night before. And the candy is delivered in a tin with a needle, and your job is to, or I guess this was a game that kids played, you have to etch out the centerpiece shape and hold it up intact. So again, people break their honeycomb and they're shot in the head. It's very brutal. Whereas the red light, green light shots came from the walls, these shots are given up close by soldiers with guns. It's very concentration camp. It's very dark because the killing now is one-on-one. There are people right there who are going to shoot you in the head. And they're going to do it the minute they see you screw up. So our main character realizes that by picking the umbrella, he has screwed himself because the other shapes are much easier to carve out. Much easier. And those people with those shapes do it quite easily. He's not so lucky. And it's not until he figures out that he has to lick the candy and thin it out that it's easy enough, that it's easy to cut, and he can get the umbrella out. But we see people just losing their minds trying to cut this candy out. And we see one guy rebel. And I think that's my big issue with Squid Game as a whole. is that even though at this stage of the game, people have volunteered, they know what they're getting into, who's going to stand there while somebody puts a gun to your head? Aren't you going to run? Aren't you going to put your hands up? But these people just sort of look dejected, and then blam, they're dead. There's a weird giving up portion to Squid Game that I found maddening. And maybe it's a cultural thing. I don't know. But nobody, other than very few and far between people, fight back against this system. Nobody aggressively tries to escape. Nobody puts their hands up when they're about to be shot. They sort of just take it like, well, I screwed up. I failed this game, and then they're killed. The cop moves about the building, and we're given this bizarre subplot where some of the soldiers are harvesting the organs of the fallen players. So before they're put in the incinerator, they take them to this private room where one of the players, who's a surgeon on the outside world, harvests their organs and puts them in solution bags where divers, I guess, take them to the mainland or a ship to be sold. It's a weird subplot, and it goes nowhere. Eventually, everybody involved gets killed, except our hidden cop character. He manages to escape unscathed. It does one bit of business, and it shows you that they're getting the organs out through a series of hidden tunnels that are placed there so that the people who run the island, in case there's an emergency, can get out. Now, that's good information to have. And it does set up, again, that there's somebody controlling all this. But again, there's no rhyme or reason to it. We're not sure who or why. We're introduced to Kylo Ren's private apartment where he watches these games on a big TV, and he has little toys with him. It's very strange. Again, a lot of the Squid Game is not revealed. And it's a lot like Lost in that these mysteries are what keep you watching, because you find yourself like, well, I'm not going to stop watching until I figure out what the hell that is and why they're doing it that way and what's going on and about all these tunnels and where do they lead to and why does he have an ancient phone from the 80s that he talks to people on. You know, why is Kylo Ren using a corded phone with push buttons? It's interesting. The people in the main control center all sit at what look like arcade games. There's a lot of gaming to it, but it's not uber sophisticated like you would assume. Like, it's not uber technology. It's all very rudimentary. I mean, the honeycomb game is, if you were to play it, it's $1 to play. Anybody can play it because it costs nothing. And these candies they got for it were made literally by a street vendor in Korea, because it's a Korean child tradition to get this candy and then try to carve out the shape. Now, again, I don't know any of that. It took a little bit of research to even figure out what they're doing and why. So it does play into, ultimately, again, what the plot of the show is. Episode 4 is Stick to the Team. We get more of the organ harvesting. There's a riot in the dorm where they're killing each other, and that's all done on purpose. They're limiting food rations so that they'll fight amongst each other and that they'll kill each other. And then we have another really big set piece, and that's the Tug of War. The Squid Game alternates between really expensive set pieces like red light, green light, and then small set pieces like the honeycomb candy. So we've done red light, green light, then we drop to the candy, and now we're back up for Tug of War. Now, Tug of War is arguably the biggest thing we've seen so far. It's a very elaborate Tug of War set high above the floor so that if your team loses, you all fall to your death. It's very clever. I applauded exactly how it worked, how it looked. It was shot beautifully. It is a terrifying game. It looks like they're up there playing it. I give it up for, again, the production design was top notch, especially on this one. The rope is fed through a circle, and the teams are on opposite platforms with the abyss between them. And there's a guillotine that will drop down to drop the losers into the abyss. It's all done very cleverly. And of course, as they're divvying up teams, the mob guy who has the organ harvesting doctor on his team knows what the game is. He's harvesting organs so that they'll tell him what's coming up next. So he knows it's a tug of war and that they should have strong players. So the 10 players they put together are like an army. And our hero is left with a team of misfits. The old guy, 2 women, 3 women, just really misfits. And as they're riding the elevator up to the top of the game platform, the old guy clues them in on, this is how we're going to win. We're going to lean back, then we're going to dig in, and then finally it's the doctor, the smart doctor, who says, let's give them 3 steps forward and then pull them back the other way. Again, it's all done really well. You know, Tug of War is a hard game, and it's a game that you people used to play at picnics, but it has incredible amounts of injuries of people who have their arms pulled out of their sockets rather than let go of that rope. That's true. That really happens. So when our team ultimately, like, we don't know, because this show ends for the first time on a cliffhanger, literally. When we get back to episode 5 of Fair World, they win the Tug of War game. And they're exhausted. And they're taken back to the dorm. This is where the cop breaks into Kylo Ren's office and discovers finally some information about his brother. And it's that his brother won this game in 2015. So 6 years ago, the cop's brother won this game and was never heard from again. And all of the records are paper. There's not a lot of technology again. Remember the push-button phone, the paper records. There's a bit of cat and mouse in this. But it gives you more of the characters. Like I said, there's a lot of character development because they got to fill hour after hour. And if you just put these games in, if it was just Most Extreme Elimination, you wouldn't have the full show that it has. And along those lines, the show that this is most like in America, you'd think it'd be like Wipeout or some of those other extreme competition sports, but it's not. It's most like Big Brother, if you ever watch Big Brother, because we get to know the characters, we, the home audience, get to know the characters a lot. And then they play these games that are candy-colored and brightly lit, but are ultimately excruciating and a little bit dangerous. They play a game on Big Brother where they just have to move an egg up chicken wire using their fingers. And by the time the game's over, every one of those players' hands is completely bloodied from cutting the inside web with the chicken wire. I mean, that's not pleasant. They also have games where they have to hold on to things and they pass out and drop to the floor. Big Brother, again, it looks fun and candy-colored on the outside. But the surface, the reality, the truth, is that it's dangerous. It hurts. And that's Squid Game in a nutshell. These games are children's games, but they're played for deadly consequences. They really are. So episode 6 is Ganbu Ganbu, where, again, remember we just had Tug of War, this giant game. So now we drop again, and we're going to play marbles. Marbles. They have a beautiful, beautiful set that feels like everybody is back home at their childhood streets and in the dirt. They're going to play marbles. They have to pick a partner. Everybody picks a partner that they want to win with. And our hero is sort of forced to take the old guy. Now, the crazy girl is left behind. There's not one for her because when the doctor is killed, now we have an odd number of people. And it's Kylo Ren himself that shoots the doctor when he's they're trying to get him back into the game room because he's been trapped outside running around. Anyways, they play marbles and they're told that instead of playing together, now they're facing off against each other and the loser will be killed. So everybody who picked a partner based on someone they liked now has to watch them die in front of them. The young pickpocket picks another girl who we know now is going to die. The hero picks the old guy who is now going to die. There's a guy that has picked his wife, and now his wife is going to die. And what does it say about their home life? That both of them are in excruciatingly deep debt, that they both willingly volunteered to come back. Nobody said, hey, I'll stick behind and take care of the kids. They said, no, we both got to go. Knowing that it's last man or woman standing. It says a lot about them without saying it. And that's not in the show. That's not in the show. So they play marbles. Most of them play the game of marbles. You hear a lot of shooting going on. The mob guy ends up playing a winner-take-all game in the dirt and finally wins. The two young girls decide to just throw their marbles towards the wall. Closest wins. And the other girl gets shot in the head. And then the doctor, who's now playing the Middle Eastern guy, cheats him. Tricks him into running around with what he thinks is the bag of marbles, but what is actually a bag of rocks. And the game says, get your opponent's marbles any way you can without physical violence. So he tricks him, and the guy dies. It's brutal. We've seen the doctor now killing people indiscriminately to get further in the game. It's pretty brutal. But the worst is saved for our main character. Him and the old guy spend the 10 minutes talking, and the old guy's dementia takes over, and he starts believing that he's back home, even though we're not. And he thinks that he's actually in his home. And again, that will all come into play later. But when they finally get to the game, our main character cheats the guy out of his marbles. Since the guy can't remember what he said, they're playing even and odd, he just changes the answer. You said odd. You said even. And he takes the guy's marbles. And the last shot, like I know they're not going to show us this guy getting shot in the head. Even this show's not brutal enough for that. But he walks away, and around the corner, you can see the guy raise a gun, you hear a blast, and he walks back into the game room. And now we are down to half because everybody went in and everybody's partner had to get killed. So back in the dormitory, we find out that the crazy lady was spared because she didn't have a partner. And instead of being dragged away to her death, she just got to skip that whole game. So everybody really hates her. Now the mob guy hates her because at one point he had sex with her in the bathroom. There's a lot of weirdness about the bathroom. Like, they're able to go in the bathroom and smoke and have sex, and there's nobody with a gun in there. And you're like, well, why didn't anybody use that to get the hell out or to devise a plan? But again, that's not the show. These people, by the second round, are here willingly and don't want to escape. They want everybody else to die so they can take the money and go home. Everybody in it is selfish. Everybody in it somehow got themselves into debilitating debt and is now eagerly awaiting the death of other people so that they can get themselves out of said debt. So I'm not sure who to root for. Nobody is noble. Our main character has a little kid who is his daughter is going to move away to the United States unless he can come up with enough money to keep her there or go himself. So he is playing these games ultimately for his daughter to get out of debt and reclaim his father mantle because he's a deadbeat dad who buys his daughter crap food because he blew his money at the track and then wasted the rest of it on a claw machine instead of going to a gift shop. Again, you have to deconstruct these figures. You have to take these characters down to their base level so that they can redeem themselves. But here's the thing, is anybody here worthy of redemption? Because any redemption that was available has now gone out the window because our main character literally cheated an old man to death. The old man's dead because our guy cheated. And, the old guy pissed himself, so this guy gave him his jacket. He did the right thing, and then ultimately cheated a dementia-ridden man out of his marbles. The man lost his marbles literally, and then he was shot in the head. Wow. Okay, episode 7 is the VIPs. This is where the whole show changes. The whole show changes, and now we meet the people who have been watching. The show, we now realize, has been televised to specific locations all around the world where uber rich men are betting on the outcome and any other bet they can come up with. If there's something to bet on in the game, they will bet on it. They show up dressed in elaborate animal masks. We're shown Kylo Ren greeting a man who is supposed to be the host of the games, but he opts not to wear his mask and not to host the games, and he'll tell him why later, and he should take over for him. So that's how Kylo Ren becomes the host of these games. And again, if you weren't picking up the socioeconomic ramifications of the plot, now it all comes into play because we're doing this for why? Rich, boorish, capitalist Americans. Yes, there are other nations and nationalities represented, but the only one we're introduced to, the only one who's shown to be a complete clod, is the boorish American, who is supposed to be, I guess, Donald Trump in the context of the show. It's all really heavy-handed because, okay, they're betting on people's lives. They have so much money that now they're betting literally on people's lives. It's the most dangerous game. In case you weren't repulsed enough by him, the American will not only be a guy who bets on the lives of people and likes the number 69, but he also to sodomize the help. And our cop, who has now maneuvered himself into being one of the wine bringers, the drink bringers, the service people in the upper echelons of this place, is now taken back to a room where this old guy strips naked. And he's shown completely nude. And you're like, okay, all right, sure. Make it worse. Like, okay, we get it. You hate capitalism. We get it. The whole show is a flaming burnout of capitalism. Okay, well, whatever. It's so heavy-handed in this episode. And it could have been handled classy. Like, these guys could have been handled as really uber evil guy. But not without making them nude sodomite rapists or whatever they're going to do in that room. He gets taken out. I don't think he gets killed, but the guy grabs him by the testicles and makes him confess on camera as to what's going on. So now the guy, our cop, has a phone filled with all the evidence of what's going on this island. All the evidence. And Kylo Ren knows he's there because the cop put the phone down the wrong direction. And all the VIPs are here to watch a live game, and that's because we just did marbles. Now we're going way back up for the glass bridge, which, again, it's a fantastic set piece. The bridge is alternating panels of glass. Some panes are glass, and some panes are coated. And if you can jump on the coated pieces, you can make it to the end. They do this exact same game in Most Extreme Elimination. They are rocks in the water, and some are wobbly, and some are stationary. And you can only land on the stationary rocks to get across the water. It's one of the most popular parts of Most Extreme Elimination. Only this time it's played 100 feet in the air, so that if you pick the wrong pane of glass, you crash to your death. Well, before you go in, you have to pick a vest with a number on it. 1 through 16, I think, is how many are left. And our main character is faced at the end with either 1 or 16. And he willingly gives up number 1, the first guy to play, and takes 16, the last guy to play. And when he finds out what the game is, he's basically assured his survival because everybody will have gone in front of him, showing him the only true path across the glass. Now, this is all played, again, it's long and drawn out, but it's okay because there's a lot at stake. People are watching. The bad guys have revealed themselves. This is going to thin out almost everybody in the herd. We meet a guy who is a glassmaker who knows which panels to pick. And even he goes down in flames. And the mob guy ends up at the end with the crazy woman in tow. And she takes them both out. So in the end, only 3 remain. Our main character, his cousin, the smart guy, and the pickpocket. And they finally make it across the glass with only a millisecond to spare before the bridge itself blows up. And in doing so, sends shards of glass everywhere. This is a weird moment in the show. I know that in your mind's eye, you can see people being left on the glass and falling to their doom amidst a shower of shards. Now, that was never going to happen because our main character is the last guy. He can't get in front of anybody, really. So the blowing up of the bridge is superfluous, except it mortally injures the pickpocket. Mortally injures her. So that she is not going to be able to play the last game. And it really sucks. It's a weird way to have that character taken out. She's not taken out by sacrifice. She's not taken out by skill. She's taken out by an accident. And I guess it's supposed to show the unpredictable nature of this show, of this process. You know, in a perfect world, she would have been whisked away to a doctor and stitched up so that she could play the final game. Even in the Hunger Games, they were able to barter for medicine from the sky. So it does seem, for her to get so far down the road and die in such a senseless way, and aren't they all senseless, Jeff? Yes, but in the context of the story, she doesn't make a sacrifice. She doesn't do something clever. She doesn't work around a rule. She simply gets shot with a piece of glass as an unintended injury of the finale of the game. I find it very, very interesting. Okay, so Episode 8 is called Frontman. Our characters, the 3 remaining characters, are treated to a fancy dinner. At the end of the dinner, they're given a knife, which they keep. Which I guess in the night before the final game, they could stab each other. But then there's no drama to that. And I know, here's the thing, I knew from the pattern of the show that the final game was going to be something really simple. Really, really simple. Because they're not going to do 2 giant set pieces in a row. So, like I said, the pickpocket dies, and our 2 main characters are sent out to the last game. But before that, our cop manages to get out of the compound and almost to safety. He gets far enough away and high enough to get a cell signal to make a call. He talks to his boss and says, send everybody to this signal. The Coast Guard, the Army, everybody. And he sends a file, but we're never really sure what goes through. It's all ambiguous. But he's being trailed by soldiers and by Kylo Ren. Now, if you watch any kind of program, if you know any kind of storytelling, Kylo Ren can only be one person. You know, when he takes off his mask, he can only be one person. There's only one person that hasn't been revealed yet in this show. And I knew it was coming a mile off. So when it arrived, it was very anticlimactic. The cop is up against a sheer wall of the ocean. It's a drop to his death. And Kylo Ren is like, you don't have to die, we can take you in. And he takes his mask off, and who is he? He's the cop's brother. Why? To what end? He won the game and decided to join them as the host or as the second in command, the front man? It's never explained. And remember, this show was never intended for a sequel. They only did what they did at the end for dramatic purposes. It's the same reason Jennifer is in the car when the DeLorean goes up into the sky at the end of Back to the Future. Because if they'd known they were coming back for a sequel, they wouldn't have put Jennifer in the car because she's sidelined immediately when they get to 2015. So making this guy the brother, there's no explanation. I must have missed it. I must have missed the explanation because I don't know why he's the brother. But he had to be because there's no other characters to introduce. There's nobody else he could be. And the guy has to find his brother. So Kylo Ren personally shoots the guy. They have a square off. Kylo Ren gets shot, and then he shoots his brother, who falls in the ocean. We don't see the body. So anything can be done with that character. We don't know where the file went, so anything can be done with that. We don't know if the police are coming. Anything can be done with that, right? It's a what if, what if, what if. Episodes 8 and 9 play out exactly how you think they're going to play. The final game is Squid Game. It's a game that we saw at the way first shots of the show where kids are playing a schoolyard game called Squid Game where you have to maneuver around a perimeter and accomplish certain tasks to get a point. And so this giant 9-hour show ultimately comes down to a fist fight in the rain between two cousins. It's brutal, it's dark, it's bloody, and ultimately the main character who has the guy dead to rights says, if we both agree to quit, we can go home now. Now that's stupid because the night prior, him and the pickpocket could have decided to end the game. 2 against 1 would have ended the game. But he didn't do that. So he let her die, and now he's going to save his horrible cousin who has committed atrocities. Murder, murder, murder. It's all brutal. There's no way for anybody to win. So the doctor stabs himself in the neck. And that makes our main character the winner of the game. And he gets all that money. So back in the outside world, it cuts to a year later. He decides to color his hair and get his life together, and you find out that he hasn't spent any of the money. He gave a bunch of it away to help the families of the people that he played with. And a lot of those storylines are closed off because it means that their relatives didn't die in vain. That their deaths mattered. That they mattered. And ultimately, that's what's important. It has a maddening ending where he is at the airport and he's on his way to see his daughter. He has all the money in the world. He's got his life together. He's not a degenerate gambler anymore. And he's going to see his daughter. And that's ultimately what he wanted. All he has to do now is atone for his sins of the past. And as he's getting on the plane, he sees the slapping guy in the airport. He's slapping a guy, and he manages to get the business card of the guy that was being slapped. And when he calls it, they know who he is, and they tell him to get on the plane. And instead, he turns and walks the other way. I'm assuming to stop the people who are playing the games and to uncover the truth. But at what cost? It's the Ray Garrity approach of you've won and now you've gone insane. Now you're on a revenge path instead of going and taking care of your daughter. There is no happy ending for our main character. I guess there shouldn't be. And then the ultimate reveal, and I should have got to this first, the ultimate reveal is that he gets summoned to a high-rise building on Christmas Eve where the old man lies dying and says that he was behind the whole thing. So 001 was actually behind the entire affair. He had run the games for years, and he was bored because he was uber rich and he didn't know what to do with his life. So in the end, after watching the games for 30 plus years, he decided he was going to play the game for the first time. Now, that's all well and good. That's like Ray Garrity's opponent being the son of the guy who started the long walk. There is some connection. I get that. We've all seen that been done before. But it begs the question, was the old guy willing to die to play the game? Because in red light, green light, unless they specifically told the sharpshooters not to shoot him, even if he moved, he would have been killed. For the candy game, he could have just picked the circle or the square and been fine, because he'd done it a million times. For Tug of War is where your explanation gets dicey, because even with his method of playing the Tug of War, they still could have lost. Theoretically, they could have lost. Now, they didn't, but they could have. And what were they going to do? Were they going to allow their boss to fall to his death? And I know the answer should be yes on all of these accounts. It should be yes on all of these accounts, except when it comes to the marble game, where he loses because the other guy cheats, they don't shoot him in the head. When faced with the idea that the rules stated, get your opponent's marbles any way you can without violence. So him cheating the guy by lying is within the rules. The old man lost the marble game according to his rules. Now, you do understand now why he thought he was at home. Because literally he was. It was a replica of his home. But why didn't they shoot him in the head? Why aim the gun and then fire to the left or the right and not shoot him? Because they're behind closed doors? It's pulling the rug out from under the audience without a real basis, because there were moments along the way he really could have died. And then when he's supposed to die, they don't shoot him? Did they go, yeah? Did he at the last minute go, I was just kidding? He couldn't have done that in the other games. The other games he would have died. He could have been stabbed in the middle of the night by the other players. He could have been bludgeoned to death. There's real consequences, and yet when it's finally his turn to go, they don't literally pull the trigger. I found that really odd. It took a lot of the weight out of the ending of him being revealed as the mastermind, because the mastermind should have won the games fair and square or found a way to exit without being killed, because he put his own life on the line like the rest of them. And he did it just for kicks. Just to do it. Interesting, right? It does set up an interesting sequel. I don't know where you would go with it. We've already seen the games. We've already done it. It's already all been revealed. So I don't know where you go with that. I think, and I know that in the world we live in, a sequel is inevitable. But to maintain the purity of it, they should just never go back to that well. They should just let it sit. Just go, we did it. That's the show. We don't know what happens to the character at the end. We don't care. He's off on a revenge mission. And whatever you imagine is going to be 10 times better than what we could come up with. Because if they did a sequel, they'd have to explain so much of it. And I don't think they have it to explain. Why didn't they shoot him? Why is the brother the front man? What? How many people were in on the organ harvesting because they're able to move through hallways and people are erasing the camera footage? So there are cameras in some places but not in the others. Like Squid Game on the surface is very well done. But if you start peeling the layers, you see kind of like it crumbles under its own weight. And that's no fault of the writer. This is a very well executed production. The problem for me, and it's just for me, is that I've seen it all before. I've read it all before. And like Harry Potter, where she took a spin on werewolves and witches and wizards and that, it's a really new, a really well done new blending of familiar tropes. I think that's all great. My hope is that there's never a sequel. This is it. But it's Netflix. There's going to be a sequel. There's going to be a video game. There's going to be a Halloween costume. There's going to be a live experience somewhere where you can go play the Squid Games, or, you know what I mean? There's going to be all of that, and that's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in. The other thing I should mention about Squid Game is that the voice actors are not doing the show any favors. If you watch it dubbed, I watched the show dubbed with subtitles. And the dubbing actors are not the best. They make the main character on the verge of hysteria nearly every 10 minutes. Every few minutes, he's like screaming. The crazy woman, she is like a shrill voice. Ah! And there are so many of the voices that they're just not very well done. It's not a good dubbing. If I was Netflix, what do I know? It's the #1 show on Netflix. But imagine how good it would be with get some legitimate voice actors in there to really find the nuances in the dialogue and not just the screaming of it. The other issue is if you watch it dubbed with the subtitles like I did, there's 2 different shows running on the screen. And in some cases, the intent is completely opposite in both. The biggest example I can remember is when they're trying to choose teams for the Tug of War. Our main character goes up to the pickpocket and says, in the dubbed dialogue, he says, "You need to join a team." And he has his hand out like our team. But in the subtitled, which is the more direct translation, because they're not worried about the lips matching up, he says, "You should join our team." That's a much different intent. One is, hey, join a team. The other is, join our team. And the show has dozens and dozens of examples of that where the dubbing and the subtitle intent are just off enough to make the show a little different. It'd be interesting to watch it separately, to watch it once with dubbed and once with subtitles, and see if you come away seeing the difference. Because I noticed it right away watching them both at the same time, almost to the point of distraction. But that's, I'm nuts. You ever seen Broadcast News with Albert Brooks? There's a moment where he is singing and reading at the same time, and he's so thrilled with himself. And you're like, what a jerk. That's me. I'm the jerk. I'm the one with the subtitles and the dubbing on. Well, hey, folks, that's Squid Game. Something current. I actually watched something current and reviewed it. It's a new plateau for me. But everybody else was talking about it. I thought, I should jump in and talk about Squid Game. Would you play the Squid Game? See, I wouldn't. I would recognize the odds are against me and that the idea that I could pass unscathed through every game, I wouldn't play those odds. I do know that there is a scenario you could set up where people are flipping a coin and you only progress if you win the coin toss. And if you have enough players, one person could win a coin toss 50 times in a row if you set it up properly, but you need enough people. And by exponentially increasing the amount of people, you lower the odds of that. You increase the odds of that happening. But then you also see how low your odds are in a normal setting. And I know that hurts my head. It's probably hurting yours, but that's the way it goes. So no, I would not play the Squid Game. I would not join a group of 456 people with the idea that I'm going to be the one that wins in the end. Unless it was, hey, Squid Game and every question is movie trivia about movies released between 1984 and 1988. Oh, sign me up. You see what I'm saying? But just going in blindly? No, I wouldn't do that. But maybe you would. Hey, another episode in the can. I'm Jeff Tucker. We continue our march to episode 500. We're almost there. I'm going to try to do the count this week so I know. This is 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
So I went to the post office. Oh, by the way, this is one of those after the credits scenes. Sometimes we do on 91 Reasons. Not very often, but sometimes. I went to the post office, and as I was getting out of the car, I was struck like, I forgot to talk about the soldiers themselves of the Squid Game. Where do they come from? Who are they? They have to come from somewhere. They have to be recruited somewhere. They have to drive around the city and get on the ferry. So it can't be super secret, especially, remember, this is modern day. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody is the cell phones are in the show. So it would be very, very difficult to have that many guys. It reminds you of a James Bond movie where the bad guy has an entire army of people who are willing to die for him. So who are these young men that are recruited? I mean, maybe there's the sequel show. How the Squid Game recruits their soldiers and tells them, like, hey, when you come work for us, you get to shoot people in the head. And then if you're really lucky and you have a lot of drive, you can carve up their bodies and sell their eyeballs and kidneys. It asks a lot of questions that are never answered. And again, I know that you can't answer every question. Some things have to be left to their own mysterious ways. But they show these guys loading boxes, loading bodies, serving food, driving forklifts, driving vans. Like everybody is very employed. Who are they? Where do they come from? Do they have a break room? Is there a Squid Game break room? Do they get days off? How often do they do the Squid Game? Is it once a year? So they have to hire these guys in, and you have to explain it like every year, and you're like, Squid Game? Yeah, I did that last year. I'm not going to do it this year. And bang, they kill you. A lot is left unexplained. Because again, these are people willing to kill for money. That's a lot of murderers. You know, a lot of people join the army and fight for their country. This would be people who do it strictly for the money. So I'm confused as to who would do this, and why wouldn't some of the people who play the game just say, look, I want to be a soldier. These guys must get paid. I need a job. You've got people you've got positions to fill. Because some of these people do get killed in the line of duty. It's okay because, they're murderers. So it's when they get killed, you're like, well, that's what you deserve. But, they have to come from somewhere. An interesting question, Squid Game. An interesting question.